after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea. So we have already experienced the birth. We've already experienced the angels revealing the truth of that birth to the shepherds. The shepherds have already come and engaged the presence of the infant Jesus who was laying in a manger. And they have spread the word, as it is said to us, about the awesome things that they had seen with their own eyes. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." Let's pause for a moment because we need to understand the picture. Now, normally our picture is this right here. We have wise men in a stable hanging out with shepherds and a baby laying in a manger. But the reality is that's not a very accurate picture or an accurate timeline. The fact is, these guys, the Magi, were never in this birth picture. We've got to give ourselves about a 2-year window. Okay, so it's possible, in fact, it's probable that Jesus maybe is around 2 years old at the time when the Magi arrive and meet Jesus for the first time. So that's picture number one that needs to be clarified a little bit. Secondly, let's look at this Herod guy, okay? Because if Herod is the king, and we understand that Caesar Augustus, who we looked at last week, is ruler over all of Rome. Well, who is this Herod guy, and what role does he play in this, or what environment has he created in which these Magi show up and have this conversation with him? Well, first thing you need to know about Herod was that there's one word, if there had to be one word that described who Herod was, it was paranoia. Paranoid. Absolutely paranoid. And there was such an extreme paranoia with Herod that he was a brutal killer. In fact, it's documented that he had gone through and had killed much of the Sanhedrin out of paranoia. And then apparently he had killed his wife out of paranoia. Okay, I didn't want to hear any amens to that. All right, good. I'm just glad there was silence there. Killed his wife out of paranoia. Killed his mother-in-law out of paranoia. No amens. Okay. Killed 3 of his sons out of paranoia. This guy was crazy. Absolutely paranoid. And because of this history, because of this insanity that was this Herod, you can imagine the fear that is in the people around him. They treaded on very thin, cracked ice around this guy. This is the environment that this King Herod has created. In come these Magi from the east. Now, these guys were not kings as some would project. They weren't kings, but they were wise men or Magi. And most likely, these guys have come from Babylon and are actually the result or the continuation of the result of the exile in Babylon in the spirit of Daniel. If you go back to the book of Daniel and you read through Daniel and you see what happened under King Nebuchadnezzar and under King Darius with Daniel, you'll realize that Daniel became and was put in charge of the Magi. He was the head of the Magi. And it's out of Daniel that we see the prophecy on the exact time on which Messiah was going to come into the earth. Most likely, these Magi were understudies, or it was handed down to them the truth about Messiah showing up. These guys were still among the Jews that had not returned yet to Israel, most likely. And you can begin to understand then that what they were looking for, and when they saw his star, they understood what it meant. We often have the picture of 3. We have 3 right here. But there's really probably a great company of Magi. The reason that we have deduced that there was three was because they brought three gifts, right? Frankincense, gold, and myrrh. We'll look at that in a minute. But really, there was probably a great company. So you can imagine a crowd of magi arriving into Jerusalem. And when that would happen, people around would kind of stop and go, wow, what is going on here? And it might help as we continue to read, you might have a better understanding of what's happening. We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed. You don't want a paranoid guy disturbed. It creates a bad environment, okay? And all Jerusalem with him. They were all disturbed. Disturbed at what? Were they disturbed at possibly this crowd, this company of magi arriving into town, making a declaration? Hey, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We have come to worship him. What? So, verse 4, when he, Herod, had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. Now you would go, wait a second, isn't Herod a Jew? Doesn't he understand this stuff? Actually, Herod was not a Jew. He was an Edomite. And this was a problem for the Jews because Rome had placed Herod as king over them, as sort of a sub-leader under Caesar, of course. And Herod's not even a Jew. And so Herod apparently doesn't even understand what the scripture has to say about Messiah. So he calls together the chief priests and teachers of the law, and he asks them where the Christ was to be born. What is this that they're talking about? And they begin to quote the scripture. Well, it's in Bethlehem in Judea, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel. Then Herod, the paranoid, called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. Now let's pause for a moment and just kind of talk about this star, because lots of people have tried to make sense of what this star was. And you've got astronomers and astrologers and historians making reference to a comet, or making reference to the alignment of Jupiter and Saturn at a certain point in time in history that's well documented, that probably was a star. And others say, you know what, it's just an awesome, miraculous sign that God gave so that these magi would be able to know exactly where the Christ child was. Regardless of what the truth is, and I'm sorry that I can't tell you exactly what it was because I'm not that smart. But regardless of what it was, it definitely served a purpose, didn't it? It brings these guys all the way from the Babylonian area into the Bethlehem area to find and worship the Christ child. It was a sign unto them. Verse 11. On coming to the house. By the way, that's the key, a key phrase there for us understanding that the baby's still not laying in a manger. Okay? On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. And then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Well, let's talk about these gifts. Because has anybody handled myrrh recently? Frankincense? Anyone? Frankincense? Okay, these are things, it's like, okay, There's definitive meaning in these things. And they brought these gifts on purpose because they had studied the scriptures and they understood what Jesus was about. And when you realize the meaning of these gifts, you realize that they understood who they were coming to see. The gold represents royalty. That gift given to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Frankincense was used in the priesthood. It was a priestly thing. And here they are giving this gift to the great high priest, is he not? And then myrrh was for burial. And they understood that not only is he the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, not only is he the great high priest, but he is and is going to be the suffering servant, the sacrificial lamb. Consider for a moment how you give gifts. Consider for a moment how you might give a gift to somebody that you really, really adore. You think through it. There's a meaning behind the gift, isn't there? There should be. These magi had taken time to understand who Jesus was, why he had come, what he was going to do for mankind. And they laid these treasures down at his feet, representing the significance of who Messiah was for the world. When they had gone, we're at verse 13. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So Joseph got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." Now, when Herod, same Herod before he died, when Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. So this is our timeline. This is how we know we're in a 2-year window. The Magi had seen the star. There had been a 2-year window from the time that they had first saw the star until they finally showed up and worshiped Jesus.